Each Thursday throughout the campaign, we'll be joined by two silver-tongued political veterans, former stars of the hustings, now liberated from party constraints, to share their views. In Adelaide, Christopher Pyne was a Liberal Member of Parliament for 26 years and served as Minister for Education, Industry, Defence and more. And joining us from Canberra, Bill Shorten spent 17 years in Parliament, was Leader of the Labor Party and Minister for the NDIS, Government Services, Employment and more. Welcome to you both, gentlemen. I'm going to start with you, Christopher Pyne. Peter Dutton claims he would have got a better deal. He would fight by being tougher and leveraging our defence relationship. Is it convincing?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what that looks like, Sarah. I don't think that Donald Trump is predictable, and the announcements he's made today, which he describes as one of the most important days in the United States history, I'm not sure whether they'll stand the test of time, because in a couple of years, higher tariffs, meaning higher prices in the United States, potentially higher unemployment, because businesses are closing because no one's buying their goods and services. I'm not sure that these tariffs will last through the entire period of the Trump administration. So I think you can say that you'd be tougher, especially if you're not in government. But I don't think any side, Labor or Liberal, really want President Trump inserted in this election campaign, because I think it has dangers for both sides.
Let me take that to Bill Shorten. The long shadow cast by Donald Trump on this election. At the moment, who is it benefiting?
Well, Donald Trump's not benefiting everyday Aussies nor citizens of the world. In terms of this election, I think Peter Dutton's found himself in a bit of a diabolical position, because on one hand he says that he's able to get on better with the President Trump, and on the other hand he says he'd be tougher to President Trump. To me, that sounds dangerously like having a bet each way, and he's in danger of playing in the traffic, and that's not a good place to be. I actually think Anthony and the team are playing it as best you can. I mean, the reality is the tariffs are obnoxious, but Australia's receiving a smaller tariff than a lot of other countries tick. The real problem, I think, that Trump plays for Peter Dutton in this election and his team is it goes to the epicentre of, I think, the problem for the Libs at the moment. It's that, what's their economic plan? He sort of says, I'll ring Trump or I'll leverage Trump. There's no plan behind the Libs, and you've got to do your homework in opposition.
Christopher Pyne, I just want to ask you this, because there is still sympathy for and support for Donald Trump in parts of the Liberal base. So is there some wisdom to what Peter Dutton is doing, insofar as there are echoes of Trump policies as part of his policy offerings?
Well, I think Donald Trump being involved in our campaign is like a loaded dog on a mining site. I think it presents problems for both sides of politics. I think the last thing Peter Dutton wants to do is be seen to be the Trump candidate in this election. Because of compulsory preferential voting, you win elections in Australia from the centre, either the centre-right or the centre-left. You don't win them from the right. So those people on the coalition side that believe, Trumpism is to our advantage, I think misunderstand the two different markets of the United States and Australia. But equally, I think instinctively, people do believe that if Peter Dutton was Prime Minister, he'd probably have a better relationship with Donald Trump. I mean, for example, Donald Trump's had a lot to say about Kevin Rudd, and yet Kevin Rudd is still ambassador in the US. And I agree that he shouldn't be removed, because to remove him would be to give in to the Republican Party and Donald Trump, who doesn't support Kevin Rudd remaining there, and I think Anthony's made the right decision. But it does instinctively send a message to people that because the coalition is on the side of the political spectrum that Donald Trump finds himself on, he might be able to deal better with the White House. So I think Anthony also doesn't want Donald Trump inserted in this election either, because while that would be unspoken, I think some people would have that view. So both sides really want to keep this election on Australian issues.
Now, Bill Shorten, at the same time, there has been a bit of shedding of or support for the coalition to its right flank. Can you see in any of the decisions that are being made at the moment an attempt to stop that shift to Palmer and One Nation?
Well, I think that Palmer is a problem for the coalition. When there are some people who vote Liberal who are quite right-wing, and they tend to vote Liberal when they think the Liberals are going to win. But where they think the Liberals and the Nationals are going to lose, they start going out for the more extreme parties like Palmer's, I don't know, Trumpet
yes.
or whatever group. So
Trump and
I think,
Patriots, I think.
no, Clive's always been a clever marketer. But the point about it is, I think it's a problem that, I mean, we saw in the Werribee by-election in Victoria, it was a state issue election, by-election. There was a big swing against Labor, but only a third of the votes went to the Liberals. So I think that the rise of these right-wing parties is, I think it's a real problem for the Liberal Nationals, because one, it's a sign of lack of confidence in the right-wing base of the Liberals about the coalition's chances, and two, once people start voting for those small parties, they don't all head back to the same party they traditionally voted for.
I'm just going to stay with you for a minute, Bill Shorten, because you've raised the state that dare not speak its name, that of Victoria, which is obviously presenting a very serious problem for the government. Have you ever seen less propitious circumstances in Victoria?
1990?
Yes.
Joe Bjelke, Hawke lost 7 seats in 1990. He scraped home. I don't think it's as bad as 1990. I think there is some frustration in Victoria with the state Labor government. I think as people get closer to the election, they're going to realise that there's not a state politician on the national ballot paper. It's an election in Canberra for issues like Medicare and tax cuts. So, yeah, listen, it's a bit ugly down there at the moment, but I think as we get closer to the day, people will have to work out who do they want in charge nationally. Not a vote in this election won't decide who runs Victoria.
Christopher Pyne, let me bring you in there. When a state government is as unpopular as this one appears to be, does what Bill Shorten just said wash? Can you make that distinction?
Well, I'd like to comment on both the points that Bill made about the far right and Victoria. Well, I think it depends where the votes leach from Labor in Victoria. I mean, if they go to the coalition in safe Labor seats that Liberals can't win, well, then it may well be a very much higher vote for the Liberal Party across Victoria that doesn't translate into a number of seats, which is what we saw in the last state election in Victoria, where if you listen to some of the media, you'd think Daniel Andrews was the most unpopular premier in the history of Victoria. But let's not forget, he actually won very convincingly at the last state election. But I do think the seats will change in Victoria. I've got no doubt about it. But whether there'll be as many as some people are predicting, I think is another matter. In terms of the far right, look, the Labor Party had a very low primary vote at the last federal election and formed government and now have 78 seats. They won 77 on election day. But they had a very low primary vote, but they got preferences back from the Greens, from independent candidates, which got them across the line in many seats. So if people want to vote for far-right candidates, the Trumpet of Patriots and the One Nation Party, they won't be preferencing Labor second or third. They'll be coming back to the Liberals or the Nationals. And so I really do think it's a bit of a furphy to think that the coalition is in more danger from the far right than Labor is from the Greens.
All right, Bill Shorten, this campaign's been going for how long? It feels like rather a long time, but of course we know that it isn't. How do you judge the performance of Peter Dutton versus Anthony Albanese? We've been talking about Peter Dutton a lot. I think we need to talk about the Prime Minister as well.
Well, I think really since the beginning of the year, Anthony's been very focused. If you like, he and the government have certainly got their mojo going and a bit of momentum. I think by contrast, I'll say this straight. I think Peter's being let down by some of his colleagues. They've got, I think Angus Taylor's done, one press conference? I don't know where some of the others are. So I do think that the Libs and the Nats, now they've got to do daily media. To be honest, they haven't done the homework. It goes back to that point I made earlier. We're in uncharted territory with Trump and his impact. It's not desirable, but there's an impact there. But what it does is, where's the Liberals' economic case for change?
Well, let me bring Chris Pyne in there just in case we run out of time.
Sure.
Is Bill Shorten right? Is the case not being made for change? Are we not seeing enough policy? How do you judge the performance?
Well, I do think the election's been pretty low energy so far. It's been a week or almost a week. It does seem like the election's been running all year, and I think the public are a little fatigued by that. Anthony and Peter gave speeches very early in the piece. I mean, late January, they both gave election tub-thumping speeches, one at the Press Club and one elsewhere in I think, Melbourne, which to start the year. So I feel like the public are saying, well, we knew there was going to be an election. Now we've got a date. But the first week hasn't really excited anyone. And I think both, the election is there to be won by either side. If it's like this for the next 4 weeks, it's not going to be a very exciting election. Now, that probably suits the government. The coalition does need to make a case for change. I've been in Parliament when both sides thought they were going to win elections based on the unpopularity of the government. But the government can be unpopular. The voters have got to think the other side is going to do a better job. And let's not forget Paul Keating won an election when interest rates were 18.5% because the coalition didn't convince people of that. So I think there's 4 weeks or more to go. There's a lot more election to come. And so far, neither side have excited the punter.
And just briefly, Christopher Pyne, you've said before that Peter Dutton has been underestimated or misunderstood by people. So what do you expect to see over the next few weeks? It's a little bit low energy for now. What can change if he's been underestimated?
Well, I think the public love somebody who rises above expectations. And Peter Dutton has been cast as a very unpopular politician across the media for many, many years. He's had tough portfolios in government. And I think the last 3 years he's done an amazing job. He's held the show together. He's been competitive. And the Australian public have had a look at him and think, well, he's not what we expected him to be at all. And he's much more than the figure that was created in the previous 6 or 9 years. So I think he's got a good base to start with. He has a lot more to talk about than just protecting the borders or defence. And I think that people will see that now in the next 4 weeks, now that he's the opposition leader who gets equal time with the Prime Minister. And I don't think the Labor Party should underestimate his ability to do well at the election. And if they do underestimate it, I think they'll be disappointed.
Briefly, Bill Shorten, because we're towards the end, can he do that? Is there a danger of him being underestimated, and can he bring it round?
Anyone can win the election. The voters haven't decided yet. But I'm reminded of what John Howard said, and I think this may be haunting some of the Liberal machine, because I think the Labor campaign swung into gear. You can't fatten a pig on market day. I don't think so far the coalition has done the homework to present the alternative, whereas I think the government at this stage is saying it's about cost of living this election, it's about who can stand up to Trump, and it's about Medicare. And the Libs, John Winston Howard, I didn't always agree with him, but there's some, nor did Christopher for that matter, but there's some wisdom in the statement, you can't fatten a pig on market day.
On that beautiful note, I told the audience that you were silver-tongued. You both are. Thank you very much, and look forward to speaking to you both through the campaign. Thank you.